Donald Trump, smirking. Cheap fake hero. The words hit like a gunshot inside the hearing room. A president, Donald Trump, the 47th, mocking Jasmine Crockett, the woman who dared to stand against him. But outside these walls, the numbers tell a darker story. Over 62 million Americans say they no longer trust their own government. Hate crimes have surged by nearly 40% in the last 5 years. And when corruption walks free, justice itself hangs by a thread. This isn't just politics. It's a battle between a system built to silence and a voice that refuses to die. Today, the world will watch. Jasmine Crockett, the warrior of justice, versus Donald Trump, the man who wields power like a weapon. And it all begins right here. The air inside the chamber was heavy, almost unbearable, as if the walls themselves knew a storm was about to break. Rows of lawmakers sat stiff in their seats, aides whispered with frantic urgency, and reporters gripped their pens like weapons waiting to strike. The overhead lights blazed down, harsh and unforgiving. Every flicker of an eyelid, every bead of sweat, every twitch of the hand was magnified under their glare. The seal of the United States gleamed above it all, cold, watchful, unblinking. Then came the sound, the echo of heavy footsteps. Donald Trump strode through the doors like a man convinced the room was already his. Shoulders squared, chin lifted, his crimson tie dangling like a banner of war. He didn't just walk, he claimed space, every step a declaration of dominance. Supporters erupted in applause, their cheers rattling the wood-paneled walls. Opponents muttered curses under their breath. Reporters surged forward, voices clashing. "Mr. President, do you fear what's coming? Are you ready to face the evidence? Sir, is this the day everything changes?" Trump ignored them all. He raised a hand, brushed the noise aside like lint from his suit, and smirked. The silence he left in his wake was more cutting than any answer. And then Jasmine Crockett entered. Her presence didn't thunder into the room. It cut through it, sharp and precise, like a knife slipping between ribs. She wore her blazer-like armor, her gaze steady, unflinching, eyes lit with the quiet fire of someone who had already decided she would not lose. If Trump was chaos, Jasmine was control. For a breathless moment, the chamber tilted between them. Cameras whirred, swiveling to capture their first shared glance. The air was electric, humming, as if two opposite forces had been drawn into the same orbit. At the center dais, the chair of the committee rose and struck the gavel. "This hearing will come to order," his voice boomed, though even he sounded swallowed by the tension pressing in on every side. "Today we face questions of truth. Evidence will be weighed, testimonies examined. The record of history begins here." The gavel cracked again, the sound like a gunshot. Jasmine fixed her eyes on Trump. She was still, a fortress of resolve. Trump reclined in his chair, lips curling upward, his smirk dripping with contempt. And then he laughed. It started as a low chuckle, then swelled into something louder, bolder, rolling through the chamber with theatrical relish. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, eyes flashing as he spat the words meant to sting, meant to humiliate. Cheap, fake, hero. The insult dropped like poison into the air. Gasps broke out across the chamber. Some whispered nervously, others let out startled laughs. But every soul in the room felt the tremor. Reporters scribbled furiously, headlines already forming. The President of the United States had chosen to strike first, and he struck with mockery. But Jasmine Crockett did not blink. She let the venom linger, let it coil around the room until it began to lose its teeth. Then ever so slightly she tilted her head, a half smile brushing her lips. The look not of someone wounded, but of a warrior savoring the first swing of the fight. Her silence was louder than his insult. Cameras zoomed in, drinking in every detail. Trump's smirk, Jasmine's unshaken poise, the sweat breaking across foreheads in the gallery. Across America, millions leaned closer to their screens. Living rooms, diners, and office lobbies filled with eyes that refused to look away. The clash wasn't political theater anymore. It was war. Truth versus power, dignity versus arrogance. Trump drummed his fingers on the desk, smug as ever, trying to frame the moment as his show. his spectacle. But Jasmine Crockett was no spectator. Finally, she spoke. Her words were calm, measured, but edged with steel. "You call me a cheap fake hero," she said. "Let's see, Mr. President, if the truth can afford your lies." A ripple of murmurs shot through the chamber. Trump's smirk faltered just for an instant, enough for the cameras to catch. The gavel slammed again, the chair's voice cracking. "This is a hearing, not a circus." But his warning was in vain. The circus was already alive, and the nation was riveted. The first strike had landed. The firestorm was lit. And for the first time, Donald Trump faced an opponent who could not be dismissed, silenced, or mocked away. This was Jasmine Crockett, the warrior of justice, and her fight had only just started. If this story grips you, if you believe truth deserves a voice against corruption, subscribe to Harrison Stories, because the fight is far from over, and neither was the hearing. The chamber hadn't even settled before Donald Trump leaned forward, cutting through the chair's opening remarks with his booming voice. Excuse me. This whole thing is a sham. Everyone knows it. Everybody. You're wasting America's time." The chair banged the gavel. "Mr. President, you will have your turn." But Trump wasn't listening. He never listened. His words cascaded over the gavel's crack like thunder rolling over a weak drumbeat. "I built this country back from disaster. Nobody has done more. Nobody. And now I have to sit here and listen to lies from what do you call her? A so-called representative?" The insult hovered, daring Jasmine to bite. She didn't. Not yet. Jasmine remained perfectly still, her fingers laced before her, her gaze locked on Trump with a clarity that unsettled even his staunchest allies. She let him talk. Let him puff his chest and wave his arms. Every interruption, every sneer, every exaggerated roll of his hands painted the picture of a man drunk on his own performance. The cameras loved it. They zoomed in on his jabs, on the sweat collecting above his collar, on the forced confidence in his eyes. But the cameras loved Jasmine more. Her composure was magnetic, a counterweight to his chaos. She was the calm in the eye of the storm, and that calm was starting to rattle him. Trump slammed a palm on the table. "This is ridiculous. I should be running the country, not sitting here while this witch tries to lecture me." The chair tried again. "Mr. President, please." Trump raised his hand to silence him. No. The people want to hear the truth, and I am the truth. Jasmine Crockett, she's nothing but theater. She doesn't represent the American people. She represents her donors, her little activists, her Twitter fans. Pathetic. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Reporters scribbled furiously. Phones buzzed in laps as newsrooms outside went into overdrive. Within minutes, headlines flashed across TV screens in Washington and beyond. Trump dismisses Crockett as pathetic theater in explosive hearing. In diners across the Midwest, in barbershops in the South, in living rooms on the coast, Americans leaned closer to their screens. Some nodded with him. Others clenched their fists in rage. But no one looked away. And Jasmine, still silent. Her eyes never wavered. Her breathing was measured, her lips pressed together in something between patience and strategy. Every second she withheld her words, she allowed Trump's arrogance to multiply, allowed him to show the very thing she wanted the world to see. He thought he was winning the room. But outside, the split screen on every news channel told a different story. On one side, Trump, red-faced, blustering, spitting words with reckless abandon. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, stone steady, her silence louder than any speech. The contrast was devastating. Commentators whispered into hot mics as the feed streamed live. "He's unraveling. She hasn't said a word and she's already winning. This is psychological warfare, and she's holding the line." Trump, sensing the shift, tried harder. He interrupted again, this time sneering over one of the committee members who attempted to speak. "You people have no idea what you're doing. I should be respected." Respected. Nobody has ever treated a president like this in history. Jasmine finally tilted her head, just slightly. The motion was small, almost imperceptible, but the cameras caught it. Her eyes narrowed, and in them was not anger, not even disdain, but calculation. Trump froze for half a beat. long enough for the silence to land like a punch. Then he laughed too loudly, too forcefully, trying to reclaim the room. You see that look? She's rattled. Rattled. She knows I'm right. But America had seen. They had seen a man unraveling before their eyes and a woman refusing to flinch. The tension was unbearable now. Every cough, every shuffle of papers echoed like gunfire. Outside, cable networks broke into regular programming with live coverage. Anchors leaned forward, eyes wide, their voices barely disguising the urgency. This isn't a hearing anymore. It's a showdown. And in that chamber, Jasmine Crockett sat like a mountain. She hadn't struck yet, but everyone watching could feel it coming. The moment she would finally unleash the words that Trump could not laugh away, could not shout over, could not dismiss. The psychological blow had been struck, not by Trump's insults, but by Jasmine's refusal to bow. The firestorm was no longer one-sided. It was a duel of wills, and the world was watching. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward at last. The room seemed to inhale with her, every camera lens tightening, every reporter's pen hovering in anticipation. Her voice sliced through the tension like steel through cloth. Mr. President, since you claim to be the truth, let's begin with something simple. On June 15th, 2023, were you or were you not in possession of classified intelligence marked top secret? The words detonated in the chamber. Gasps echoed. Papers shuffled. Even the chair froze for half a heartbeat, stunned by the bluntness of the opening blow. Trump blinked. For once, his smirk faltered. He coughed, shifted in his chair, then straightened, trying to armor himself in bravado. That's a disgusting question. Totally unfair. Everyone knows I had the right to look at documents. Every president does. Obama took more. Clinton had worse. Nobody asked them these things. His hands waved theatrically, like a man drowning who pretends he is swimming. But Jasmine's eyes didn't move. They locked on him with surgical precision, the way a surgeon might hold a scalpel above exposed skin. I'll repeat the question, she said softly, each word heavy with gravity. Were you or were you not in possession of classified intelligence marked top secret? Trump chuckled, too loud, too forced. You sound ridiculous. It's a witch hunt. Look at her, grandstanding for the cameras. She doesn't care about the truth. She just wants her 15 minutes of fame. That's all Jasmine Crockett has ever wanted. A few of his loyalists in the gallery clapped, but the sound was scattered, hollow. Jasmine didn't blink. Instead, she leaned slightly closer to the microphone, her tone still calm, still steady. Mr. President, I'm less concerned with my 15 minutes and more concerned with the 43 pages of declassified logs from the National Archives. A sharp intake of breath swept the chamber. Reporters jolted upright, pens scratching madly. The chair frowned, leaning forward. Trump stiffened. Jasmine lifted a folder from the desk before her. The camera zoomed, catching the bold seal of the National Archives on the cover. These logs show clearly that classified intelligence, documents you claim to have declassified with your mind, if I recall correctly, were in your possession weeks after you left office, including, Mr. President, briefing papers on foreign military operations. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time all day, Trump had no words. His mouth opened, then closed. He shifted in his seat, the color rising in his cheeks. Jasmine let the silence stretch, each second amplifying his discomfort. Finally, she set the folder down with a sharp crack that echoed like a verdict. So before you dismiss this as theater, perhaps you'd like to answer, why did you keep those papers? The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Trump laughed, but the sound was brittle now, the edges frayed. You don't understand. You people never understand. I was protecting this country. Nobody loves this country more than me. Those papers? They were safer with me than with any bureaucrat in Washington. His words tumbled, defensive, scrambling to regain footing. His smile strained, the corners of his mouth twitching. But his eyes, those betrayed him. They flared with a flash of anger, a spark of panic he couldn't bury. Jasmine sat back, her silence once again more powerful than any accusation. The contrast was undeniable. His bluster against her restraint, his noise against her clarity. The chamber was motionless, electrified by what they had just witnessed. Reporters whispered urgently into phones. She cornered him. He didn't answer. This could be the moment history remembers. Trump tried to regain the upper hand. You see, folks, this is what happens. A nobody like her tries to drag down a president. Disgraceful. She should be ashamed. But the words no longer landed. They bounced off the walls, hollow, stripped of their usual force. Jasmine, without raising her voice, without theatrics, had punctured his armor. The duel had shifted, and Donald Trump knew it. He forced another laugh, but the cameras caught the truth he could not hide. His jaw clenched, his pupils narrowed, his knuckles whitened as his hand gripped the desk. The world didn't just see a president under questioning. They saw a man exposed. And Jasmine Crockett, calm, steady, unshaken, had drawn first blood. But Donald Trump was never one to bleed quietly. He straightened in his chair, his chest rising with exaggerated defiance, his voice swelling until it rolled through the chamber like a drum beat. This is exactly what I've been telling the American people. I am the victim here. The greatest political witch hunt in history. Bigger than Nixon, bigger than Clinton, bigger than anyone. They're not just after me. They're after you, the American people, and I'm the only thing standing in their way. His words erupted like cannon fire. The chamber crackled. Allies shifted forward in their seats, nodding vigorously. Representative Mallory, a staunch loyalist, rose from his chair and pointed across the aisle. This is a disgrace. The president is right. This committee is nothing but a sham, a circus designed to smear a man who has given his life to this country. The room convulsed. Shouts of agreement rose from Trump's flank. Hands slapped desks. Reporters stood on tiptoe, capturing the uproar. Trump pressed on, his voice rising higher, sharper, laced with indignation. I've been fighting for America my whole life. They couldn't beat me at the ballot box, so now they drag me here, hoping to humiliate me in front of the world. But it won't work. It never works, because I am stronger than their lies. He jabbed a finger toward Jasmine, his tone dripping with scorn. And you, Congresswoman Crockett, you're just another puppet, a tool of the radical left, desperate to make a name for yourself by tearing down mine. Pathetic. The gallery erupted again, half in cheers, half in jeers. Security guards stiffened, hands near their earpieces. The committee chair banged the gavel desperately, but the sound drowned beneath the storm. It was theater at its most explosive, and Trump knew how to wield it. For a moment, the balance seemed to tip. His allies shouted louder, feeding his fire. The spectacle grew, threatening to swallow the chamber whole. But Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She waited. She let the frenzy rise until it threatened to break the very walls around them. And then, when the noise had reached its fever pitch, she spoke. Her words were not loud. They didn't need to be. They cut with precision, sharp as glass. Mr. President, every time you call yourself a victim, you insult the real victims in this country. The people whose secrets you gambled with. The soldiers whose lives were put at risk. The citizens who believed in justice, only to find it cheapened by your greed. The chamber fell still, her voice carried into the silence like an arrow finding its mark. Trump's eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth, but she pressed on, relentless. You claim you stand for the American people, but the evidence in this folder says otherwise. You claim you're strong, but strength isn't measured by how loud you shout. It's measured by how accountable you are to the truth. Her gaze locked on him, unwavering, her words steady as stone. And the truth, Mr. President, is cornering you. Gasps shivered through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, their hands barely keeping pace. A senator whispered hoarsely to another, "She's pushing him back. He's actually on the defensive." Trump's face flushed crimson. He laughed, a brittle, hollow sound, his trademark smirk wobbling at the edges. You think you've got me? You think one little folder changes anything? Please, the American people see what's happening. They know I'm innocent. They know you're a fraud. But the words rang thinner now, stretched, desperate. His volume had not diminished, but his power had. Because Jasmine had shifted the battlefield. She didn't need to shout. Every sentence she delivered landed with surgical precision, pinning him where he sat. She had moved him slowly, deliberately from the center of power to the edge of the cliff. For the first time, Donald Trump looked less like the commanding showman and more like a man fighting shadows. And somewhere, deep in the steel of Jasmine's eyes, he saw it too. His bravado cracked, just enough. He shifted in his chair, leaned back as if to reclaim control, but the telltale signs betrayed him. The twitch of his jaw, the tightening of his grip on the desk, the flicker of anger that flashed too raw, too quick. The room saw it. The cameras saw it. America saw it. Donald Trump, the master of spectacle, the self-proclaimed victim turned hero, was being driven into a corner. And Jasmine Crockett, with nothing but her words and her evidence, was the one forcing him there. But Trump was not a man who surrendered ground. He leaned forward, knuckles pressed white against the table, his voice booming across the chamber. You don't scare me. You don't scare America. You can throw every lie, every twisted word, but it won't change the truth. I am the most persecuted president in history. His words rolled like thunder, shaking the chamber. His allies clapped their desks, muttering, "That's right," under their breath. Others groaned, exasperated. Jasmine waited. She let his roar wash over her like waves crashing against stone. Then she spoke, cool and deliberate, each syllable slicing clean. You say persecution, I say accountability. The difference, Mr. President, is that accountability doesn't vanish when you shout over it. The chamber tightened. Reporters' pens scratched with renewed frenzy. The duel had begun in earnest. Trump snarled, "You've got nothing. You come here with your papers, your phony records. None of it means a thing. The American people don't care about your paperwork. They care about me. They trust me." Jasmine's lips curved into the faintest smile, not of amusement, but of certainty. Trust, Mr. President, is not measured in applause. It's measured in truth, and truth has receipts. She tapped the folder before her. The sound echoed like a gavel. Trump scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. Receipts? Please. You people wouldn't know truth if it walked in here wearing a suit. All you want is to destroy me because you're terrified of me. Admit it. You're afraid. The chamber felt like an arena now, every exchange a blade striking blade. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice quiet, lethal in its calm. No, Mr. President, what terrifies me is not you. What terrifies me is what happens when power is placed in the hands of someone who believes shouting is proof and lies are protection. The words cut deeper than volume ever could. Trump's jaw twitched. He shot back with venom. You talk like some moral saint, but everyone knows you're a fraud. You built your career off division, off race, off anger. You don't care about America. You care about yourself. Jasmine did not blink. She let the accusation hang, then answered with precision. If defending justice makes me selfish, then I accept the title. But the documents don't lie, Mr. President. You did. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Trump slammed a hand on the table. Lies? Lies. You think you can sit there and call me a liar? I gave this country 4 of the greatest years it's ever had. I rebuilt the economy. I made America respected again. And you, he pointed at her, eyes burning, you've done nothing but tear it down. Jasmine's reply was razor sharp. Respect isn't built on fear. It isn't built on secret deals, hidden files, or turning citizens into pawns. Respect is built on honesty, something you've run from your entire career. The room buzzed, half outrage, half awe. Reporters whispered to each other, "She's dismantling him. This is turning into history." He looks cornered again. Trump's face reddened. His words stumbled, faster now, less calculated. You're twisting everything. You're making it sound worse than it is. Everyone knows the real criminals are the ones coming after me. The Justice Department, the Democrats, the fake news, they should be on trial, not me. Half-time, the chamber grew hotter, tenser, every sentence pushing it closer to the brink of chaos. Jasmine's eyes stayed fixed on him, calm in the tempest. Her voice cut through the storm with lethal clarity. You've blamed everyone but yourself, but the truth doesn't scatter when you point fingers. The truth waits, and it's waiting for you, Mr. President. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Trump paused, his breath catching in his throat. And outside, America erupted. On social media, hashtags trended within minutes. Ashan Crockett vs. Trump, Gashan Truth on Trial, Gan The War of Words. Clips of Jasmine's precision strikes spread like wildfire. Millions of views in hours. Commentators clashed on cable news, some hailing Trump's defiance, others marveling at Jasmine's unshakable calm. The chamber itself had become a coliseum, the duel of words transforming into a spectacle for the nation. Every glare, every pause, every syllable was dissected, replayed, judged. Trump tried to laugh, but it came out brittle, hollow. He leaned back, forcing a grin, but his eyes betrayed the fire raging inside. Jasmine remained still, composed, silent now, because silence was its own weapon. The war of words wasn't finished. But in the balance of calm against chaos, precision against noise, the edge was shifting. And for the first time in his life, Donald Trump seemed to realize words alone might not be enough to save him. So he shifted. The air thickened as he reached into a folder of his own, yanking out a stack of papers. His movements were theatrical, deliberate, the kind of showmanship that had once rallied millions. He waved the sheets like they were holy scripture. "Ladies and gentlemen," he thundered, voice cracking with manufactured conviction, "the real truth is right here. Proof that this woman, this so-called congresswoman, has been part of a plot against me from the beginning. A conspiracy, and here's the evidence." Gas rippled. Camera shutters clicked furiously. Trump slammed the papers onto the table, shoving them toward the front row. Bold headlines, official seals, names, dates. It looked damning. It looked real. Reporters scrambled, screens lit up as photos of the documents hit social media within seconds. News alerts buzzed across phones. Trump unveils explosive files accusing Jasmine Crockett of corruption. The chamber erupted in noise. Allies pounded desks in support. Opponents shouted objections. And outside, the digital world caught fire. "Bombshell!" screamed one network. "Is this the smoking gun?" blared another. Within minutes, hashtags spread like wildfire. Shaksh Crockett exposed. Shaksh Trump truth files. Isha corrupt. Confusion was the point. Trump had always thrived in the storm, where truth blurred into fog. He leaned back in his chair, a sly grin tugging at his lips as the chaos he ignited consumed the room. But Jasmine did not flinch. Her eyes skimmed the papers from where she sat. Her silence cut through the uproar like a blade through cloth. She didn't rush. She didn't snap. She waited until the noise reached its peak. Then she rose. Her voice was calm, almost too calm for the storm around her. "These documents," she said, lifting one page with delicate fingers, "are clever. They are dressed up in the right language, stamped with seals that appear authentic. But here's the problem." She held the page higher, turning it toward the cameras. "The signatures don't match, the dates don't align, and the seal you see here," she tapped it with her nail, "was discontinued 5 years before the supposed memo was written." The room froze. Reporters blinked, pens stilled mid-scribble. Screenshots of Jasmine's words hit Twitter in real time. "Seal discontinued 5 years earlier." She lowered the paper, her gaze never leaving Trump. "This isn't evidence. It's forgery. And the only person desperate enough to bring forgery into this chamber is sitting right across from me." A sharp silence cut through the chamber, heavier than shouting. Trump's grin faltered, his lips twitching as if grasping for another line. Jasmine didn't stop. "You accused me of conspiracy. You threw mud hoping it would stick. But lies don't hold up under light. And the light, Mr. President, is brighter than you imagine." It was like watching a master in a game of Go. Trump had placed his stone with drama, thinking he'd cornered her. But Jasmine had seen further ahead, and her counter-move left him surrounded. The chamber buzzed again, but now the tone had changed. Some reporters muttered, "She caught it instantly." Others whispered, "This is unraveling fast." On social media, the pendulum swung. New hashtags surged: Shakshi, Forgerygate, Shasha, Trump fakes, Shasha, Crockett counterstrike. Clips of Jasmine exposing the seal mismatch went viral. Millions watching the quiet precision of her dismantling the ploy. Trump slammed a hand on the table, louder this time, veins standing out in his neck. This is nonsense. Those documents are real. This is all part of the witch hunt. You're twisting everything to make me look bad. But the desperation bled through his tone. The swagger was cracking. Jasmine leaned closer, her voice low, steady, lethal. You don't need my help to look bad, Mr. President. You've done that all on your own. The words landed like a final stone on the board. Trump shifted in his chair, restless, glancing at his allies as if searching for rescue. But even some of them looked uneasy now, whispering among themselves. The forged papers, a weight none could ignore. For the first time, the room felt less like a debate and more like an execution. Slow, precise, and public. And outside, millions of eyes stayed locked on the unfolding battle, as though they weren't watching a hearing at all, but a death match played out with words, papers, and strategy. A match where every move mattered. A match where Jasmine Crockett was always 3 steps ahead, and Trump, for all his noise and fury, was losing pieces faster than he could place them. The game had shifted. The board was no longer his, and Jasmine had just seized control. That realization hit Trump like a slap across the face. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists on the polished table. Then suddenly he exploded. "This is a disgrace," he roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "This whole circus, it's a setup. You people should be ashamed of yourselves. And you," he jabbed a trembling finger at Jasmine, "you are nothing but a fraud, a liar, a political thug dressed up as some cheap fake hero." The chamber erupted in noise, gasps, shouts, the sharp crack of a gavel. "Order!" the chair of the committee barked, pounding the desk. "Mr. President, you will compose yourself." But Trump didn't stop. He surged to his feet, his face flushed crimson, his words tumbling out like a torrent too long dammed. "They've been after me since day one. Russia, impeachment, indictments, it's all the same. And now this witch," he spat the word like venom, "stands here pretending to be the savior of justice? She's nothing, nothing." His voice cracked, raw with fury. Veins stood out in his neck. Camera lenses zoomed in, catching every beat of sweat, every contorted expression. This wasn't the polished strong man from rallies. This was something else entirely. And Jasmine knew it. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. She simply waited, letting him rage, letting him burn himself down. Her stillness was a weapon more cutting than any shout. Finally, when the chair's gavel thundered again and Trump was forced to pause for breath, Jasmine rose. Her presence was steady, commanding, her voice low, rich, and steady as stone. "Mr. President," she began, every word deliberate, "anger does not erase facts. Shouting does not undo truth, and no amount of finger-pointing can cover the reality of your own actions." The room stilled. Trump glared at her, his chest heaving, eyes wide with the fury of a man cornered. But Jasmine pressed on, her words slicing straight through the noise. "You speak of witch hunts. You speak of conspiracies. But let us look closer. Who doctored documents here today? Who attempted to deceive the American people with forged evidence? Not this committee, not me. You." Gasps again, murmurs spread across the chamber like ripples on water. Jasmine stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. "You claim to be the victim, but every victim you've ever pointed to was nothing more than a mirror reflecting your own guilt. Every lie, every accusation, every performance, it all points back to you." Trump's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The fury was still there, but words failed him, choked by the weight of her precision. Outside, the news cycle went into overdrive. Clips of Trump shouting, veins bulging, juxtaposed with Jasmine's calm, unwavering rebuke. Headlines blazed. Trump loses control. Crockett holds the line. The contrast could not have been sharper. Trump looked less like a president and more like a man unraveling before the world. His mask of strength crumbled, revealing the raw, fragile core beneath, the paranoia, the rage, the fear. The chair leaned forward, voice heavy with authority. "Mr. President, you are reminded this is a hearing, not a rally. You will not interrupt, you will not intimidate, and you will not disrespect this chamber again." The rebuke landed like a hammer. For a flicker of a second, Trump seemed smaller, diminished. Jasmine, seizing the silence, delivered the blow he hadn't expected. "This isn't about you, Donald Trump. This is about justice. And justice cannot be bullied. It cannot be forged. It cannot be bought. It stands, even when you try to bury it beneath your tantrums." The words lingered in the air, heavy, undeniable. Trump's allies shifted uneasily in their seats. Some avoided his gaze. The performance that once drew cheers now drew doubt. He had exposed himself, not as the indomitable fighter he claimed to be, but as a man unraveling when faced with truth. And Jasmine stood tall, unshaken, her voice carrying the weight of every person who had ever been silenced, mocked, or dismissed. The cameras captured it all, a president screaming, a warrior standing. And in that contrast, the world saw him for what he truly was. Not a victim, not a martyr, but a villain unmasked. And Jasmine Crockett, the steady flame against his raging fire, had lit the path that made his shadows impossible to ignore. The chamber could barely contain the tension. Every cough, every shuffle of paper, every flicker of a camera flash seemed magnified tenfold. And then it blew. Donald Trump slammed both fists onto the table, the sound cracking through the air like a gunshot. Water glasses rattled. Papers flew. Reporters gasped. "She is the enemy of this country," he bellowed, his face twisted into a mask of fury. "This woman is no patriot. She is a traitor. She conspires against the presidency, against me, against America itself." The chamber exploded into chaos. Shouts from his allies, protests from his opponents, frantic pounding of the gavel. "Order!" the chair thundered, but the noise swelled louder. Trump's words had lit a fuse. Across social media, clips spread in real time. Trump calls Crockett a traitor. Hashtags detonated across platforms. Shaki, your enemy or hero. Rashaki, traitor accusation. Shaks, Trump unhinged. But Jasmine did not rise to meet his volume. She stood slowly, deliberately, her calm slicing against his fury like cool steel. She placed a folder on the desk before her. She didn't touch it yet. She let the silence hang, a silence heavier than Trump's shouting. And when she finally spoke, her voice carried like a steady drumbeat. "You call me an enemy, Mr. President. You say I conspire against the truth. But words are wind. Let us turn instead to something you cannot drown with noise." Her fingers slid the folder open. She lifted a small device, a recorder, and pressed a button. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with Trump's own voice, booming from hidden speakers. "They'll never catch me if we bury the files. Get rid of the papers, I don't care how. Just make it disappear. Do you understand me?" The room froze. Every heartbeat seemed audible. Reporters' eyes went wide as their fingers flew over keyboards. Cameras zoomed in with predatory focus. Trump lurched forward, shouting over the audio, "Fake! That's fake! Deep state garbage! It's a lie!" But Jasmine raised her hand, silencing the noise. "This recording," she said, her voice steady, "was not obtained by me. It was given by someone who sat in the room when you spoke those words, and that witness is prepared to testify here under oath." The doors at the back of the chamber opened. A man stepped in, suit crisp, expression grim. A former aide, someone once loyal. Gasps rippled again. Trump's face drained of color. For the first time, he faltered, not in anger, but in shock. The aide took his seat. The oath was read. And then, with a voice shaking but resolute, he confirmed the truth. "Yes, I heard him. I was there. The president ordered us to destroy the documents." The chamber went silent, so silent it felt like the air had been sucked out. Outside, America convulsed. Crowds poured into streets with signs, some cheering Jasmine's courage, others furious, defending Trump. News channels split-screened the chaos inside with the protests outside. Cities from New York to Dallas filled with voices chanting, screaming, demanding. Some cried for accountability. Others swore allegiance to Trump. The nation itself seemed to split, the hearing chamber, the epicenter of an earthquake, radiating outward. Back inside, Trump's fury flared again. But it was different now, shrill, panicked, a cornered animal lashing out. "This is illegal! Treason! You can't use this! That man's a liar! Bought and paid for! This whole thing is rigged!" His words tumbled over themselves, wild, uncoordinated, raw. Jasmine let him rage. Then when the storm subsided, she spoke again. Her tone was not raised, but it was crushing in its finality. "You can scream treason. You can point fingers. You can call me enemy. But the truth has a voice louder than yours, and today the world is hearing it." She turned toward the cameras, her gaze unshakable. "This is not about politics. It's not about parties. It's about power abused, lies told, justice trampled. And it ends. Here." The chamber vibrated with the weight of her words. Even the gavel seemed powerless now, swallowed by the history unfolding in real time. Trump collapsed back into his chair, sweat glistening on his brow, rage flashing in his eyes. But the aura of control he had carried for years was gone. The balance had shifted, and the world outside was roaring with the sound of a nation torn between fury and hope. For the first time, Donald Trump wasn't dictating the story. Jasmine Crockett was. And the climax had only just begun. Trump's chest rose and fell like a bull in the arena, nostrils flared, eyes bloodshot with rage and fear. He leaned forward, slamming his palm flat against the table, as if the sound itself might reset the room. "This is a sham," he shouted. "That tape, it's doctored. That aide, he's lying. He was never loyal, never trustworthy. Everyone knows he was weak, a nobody. And if something was destroyed, it wasn't my order, it was theirs. My staff. My people betrayed me." The words came fast, tripping over each other, frantic. His once carefully rehearsed rhetoric now sounded jagged, raw, unpolished. He pointed to the aide, jabbing the air. You're the traitor. You're the liar. And you..." His finger swung back to Jasmine, shaking with fury. "You're nothing but a puppet of the radical left, a fraud sent here to bring me down." The room thundered with competing noise, gasps, jeers, applause, and anger, all colliding into a storm. The chair's gavel pounded desperately, but it barely registered. And then in a slow, devastating ripple, it happened. Not all of Trump's allies joined his shouting. Some leaned back in their chairs, their eyes avoiding his, their expressions shifting from defense to unease. A senator who had once been his loudest defender muttered to a colleague, too close to a hot mic, "He's unraveling. This isn't good." The words spread like cracks in glass. Loyalty was splintering. The invincible wall around Trump was beginning to crumble from within. Jasmine saw it. She stepped forward, not rushing, not raising her voice, but pressing her advantage with precision. "Mr. President," she said, her tone low but cutting, "first you blame me, then you blame the media. Now you blame your own staff. Tell us, who will you blame when the mirror shows only your reflection?" Her words cut through the chamber like a scalpel. Trump barked a bitter laugh, but it rang hollow. "You think you're clever? You think anyone out there believes you? My people know the truth. They know this is all lies. They're watching right now. They'll never buy your witch hunt." He gestured wildly toward the cameras, his last bastion of power. But the live feeds told a different story. Across the nation, millions of Americans were watching, some enraged, chanting his name in crowded streets, waving flags and signs. "Trump forever." Others roared back, holding placards that read, "No one above the law," and "Justice for all." Police lines strained as protests clashed outside courthouses and capitals. Helicopters buzzed above, broadcasting scenes of near-riot conditions. The nation wasn't just divided, it was tearing itself apart in real time. Each side convinced the other was the enemy. And yet, inside that chamber, Trump looked smaller. Because while his supporters screamed beyond those walls, inside the tide was shifting. Allies whispered among themselves. Journalists scribbled notes of betrayal and collapse. Jasmine seized the silence between Trump's outbursts and aimed directly at the fracture line. "You speak of loyalty, Mr. President, but loyalty to a lie is still betrayal of the truth. And today, your own allies are beginning to see it." Her words were quiet, but the echo was deafening. Cameras zoomed in on Trump's face as the color drained, his jaw working, teeth grinding. "No, no! They'll never leave me," he hissed, more to himself than to anyone else. I made them. I gave them everything. They can't turn on me now. But in the second row, one of his closest advisors shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. A camera caught it. The image went viral within minutes. Trump's ally looks away. The symbolism was too sharp to ignore. Trump's fury boiled over again. He jabbed the air, his voice cracking. This is a coup against the President of the United States. And you... His eyes locked on Jasmine with a venomous glare. You'll pay for this. You'll all pay. The chair slammed the gavel. Enough! The word rang like a verdict. The room, stunned by the raw threat, fell into a heavy silence. Jasmine didn't move for a long moment. She stood still, shoulders squared, gaze locked on Trump's unraveling figure. Then she spoke, each word deliberate. No, Mr. President, the only one paying today is you. The words hung in the chamber like smoke after a gunshot. And outside, in the streets of America, millions felt the weight of them, whether in anger, in hope, or in fear of what would come next. Inside, Jasmine Crockett pressed forward. She had the rhythm now, the cadence of inevitability. With every document she held aloft, every line she read aloud, the walls of Trump's defenses buckled. This memo, she said, her voice steady, resonant, signed under your authority, instructs staff to eliminate records that directly contradict your public statements. Gas rippled through the chamber. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Trump lunged for the microphone, his voice cracking, hoarse from overuse. Fake! Forgeries! I never signed that. Show me proof it's real. Show me witnesses. And Jasmine, almost as if she had been waiting for the invitation, gave a small nod. Very well, she said. She turned, gesturing to the back. The doors opened. A witness stepped forward, once a trusted advisor, now a reluctant but undeniable voice. The chamber stirred, people shifting in their seats, leaning forward. The witness raised a hand, swore the oath, and began to speak. Calm, methodical. Each sentence laid another stone in the wall, closing around Trump. Trump's face reddened, his jaw clenched so tightly it seemed it might snap. He tried to interject, but his voice gave way to a rasp. The roar that once commanded arenas now sounded thin, shredded, desperate. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She stood tall, letting the silence between testimonies hang heavy. It was her battlefield, and she knew silence could cut deeper than sound. Another document surfaced. Another recording played. Another witness stepped forward. And each time Trump's body slumped lower, his hands gripping the edge of the desk as though it were the only thing keeping him upright. The contrast sharpened with brutal clarity. Trump, the former titan, now cornered, diminished, his voice ragged, and his arguments fraying into incoherence. Jasmine, the warrior, radiant in composure, wielding truth like a blade, every word precise, every strike deliberate. At one point, Trump slammed his fist on the desk again, but it no longer startled anyone. The chamber didn't flinch. Instead, murmurs rose. Impatience, frustration, disbelief. The aura of fear that once surrounded him had evaporated. Jasmine stepped closer, her eyes locked on his, her voice carrying across the chamber with the weight of finality. You accuse everyone around you of betrayal, yet the evidence comes not from enemies, but from your own hand, your own words, your own circle. How many more will you sacrifice before you face yourself? The words landed like hammer blows. Trump tried to respond, but his throat betrayed him, producing only a broken rasp. He swallowed hard, coughed, reached for water with a trembling hand. And in that moment, the image was unmistakable. Not a commander in control, not a leader wronged, but a man cornered, unraveling, stripped of the myth he had spent years constructing. The chamber buzzed with restless energy. Senators whispered urgently. Reporters scribbled furiously. The audience in the gallery leaned over the railing, barely breathing. One could feel it, the turning of the tide, the shifting of history in real time. Trump leaned forward, lips trembling, but no words came. His chest heaved with shallow breaths, his face a storm of rage and exhaustion. Jasmine took one final step. She lowered her voice, forcing everyone to lean in, to hang on every syllable. You built an empire on intimidation, on shadows, on fear. But fear collapses when faced with courage. And today, courage has spoken louder than your lies. The silence that followed was deafening. Trump lowered his gaze, his shoulders slumping, the defiance in his eyes flickering like a dying flame. For a brief instant, the man who had seemed larger than life now looked utterly, devastatingly small. The chamber couldn't contain itself. Some stood, some shouted, some applauded, while others hissed. The gavel pounded for order, but it was useless. The air itself seemed to quake with the collision of triumph and fury. On every screen across America, the image burned itself into memory. Jasmine Crockett, unyielding, towering in moral clarity. Donald Trump, hoarse, spent, and cornered by the very truth he had tried to bury. And though the fight was far from over, one thing was undeniable. In that chamber, in that moment, Jasmine had seized the stage. She was not merely holding her ground. She was ascending. The gavel struck, sharp as thunder. "The committee will recess for a closed session," the chair announced, voice taut, every syllable weighted with history. The words rippled like shockwaves. Closed session. The walls themselves seemed to tighten, sealing in the magnitude of what had unfolded. Trump blinked rapidly, his face glistening with sweat. His tie hung loose, his collar damp, his breathing shallow. He reached for the glass before him with trembling fingers, sloshing water down his wrist. "Outrageous," he muttered hoarsely, though the microphone was already switched off. "A witch hunt behind closed doors. Cowards, all of them." But the mutterings carried no force. They hung in the air like dying embers, unable to ignite. Jasmine Crockett, by contrast, sat composed, her back straight, her expression unreadable. She folded her hands, resting them lightly on the table, as though she had not spent hours dismantling the defenses of the most powerful man in the country. She looked less like a prosecutor and more like a sentinel, silent, patient, immovable. Around them, senators rose, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor as they filed out. The cameras were cut, but the nation beyond remained glued to their screens. Commentators scrambling to fill the sudden silence. In living rooms, in bars, in offices, America held its breath. On social media, hashtags collided in a frenzy. Sure justice on trial, Tracker truth or Trump, Crockett vs. Trump. Millions of posts flooded timelines every second. Some screamed in rage, others prayed in hope, others begged for calm. The nation itself seemed split down its center, pulled taut like a rope about to snap. Inside the chamber, the quiet was unbearable. Trump shifted restlessly, tugging at his cuffs, tapping the table with jittery fingers. His eyes darted to the doors as if he could will them open, as if escape might materialize if he stared hard enough. For the first time, the swagger was gone. What remained was a man stripped bare of artifice, cornered by truths he could no longer bend. Jasmine sat unmoved, her breathing slow, her gaze fixed forward. She was not naive. She knew the stakes, knew how power moved behind closed doors, how decisions could be swayed in shadows. But she also knew the strength of what had been laid bare, the undeniability of the evidence, the witness testimonies that could not be unsaid. And so she waited. The chair and committee disappeared into chambers, their silhouettes vanishing behind heavy oak doors. The lock clicked shut, a sound that seemed to echo across the country. Minutes dragged into eternities. Reporters outside whispered updates with nothing to update. Crowds pressed against barricades in the streets, chanting, shouting, weeping, praying. Helicopters thundered overhead, their spotlights sweeping across restless throngs. In some cities, people gathered around giant screens in public squares, the feed now frozen on the seal of the committee, a placeholder image more suffocating than silence itself. America was holding vigil. Inside, Trump mumbled to his lawyer, but the lawyer gave no comfort. His words came too fast, too slurred, breaking into coughs. He dabbed his forehead with a crumpled handkerchief, leaving dark blotches of sweat across his skin. At last he turned his eyes toward Jasmine, and she met his gaze. No smirk, no triumph, only steady, unflinching resolve. It was not cruelty. It was not even personal. It was justice, standing firm in its simplicity. Trump blinked, his lips parting, but no words came. He looked away first, The chamber fell back into stillness. The hum of the air vents, the ticking of a clock, the faint shuffle of guards. Every sound was amplified. Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength not for battle, but for the weight of what was coming. For she knew this was the moment between lightning and thunder, between revelation and judgment. The committee deliberated in secrecy. Whispers of shouting seeped faintly through the walls, a muffled chorus of voices rising and colliding. Trump froze at each swell of sound, his shoulders twitching, his eyes wide as if the verdict might burst through the wood at any second. Jasmine remained still, as though rooted to the earth. Half an hour passed, then an hour. The nation endured the longest wait of its modern history. And then, the lock clicked again. The doors swung open. The committee filed back in, their faces carved from stone, their eyes betraying nothing. The chair carried a folder, thick, weighted, trembling ever so slightly in his grip. Every breath in the room seemed to stop. The chair returned to the bench, sat, adjusted his glasses. His hand hovered over the microphone. In the gallery, aides, reporters, and citizens leaned forward, bodies tense, pulses racing. Trump gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles blanched white. His breath came in short, shallow bursts, his chest heaving. He wiped his forehead again, but the sweat returned instantly, dripping down his temples. Jasmine inhaled deeply, steady, her face calm as stone. She had waited her entire career for this. Not for victory, not for spectacle, but for truth to be given its voice. The chair's voice broke the silence. "This committee," he began, and the words trembled across every screen in America, "has reached its conclusion." And in that moment, an entire nation forgot how to breathe. The chair's voice dropped into the silence, steady but charged with gravity. After thorough examination of the evidence, after testimony beyond dispute, this committee finds that President Donald J. Trump has violated the trust of the American people. His actions constitute a grave abuse of power. His attempts to mislead, to obstruct, to corrupt, stand condemned before this body and before history. The gavel struck once, echoing like a gunshot. Trump's face drained of color. His lips trembled, his jaw unhinged as though the words had shattered bone. He shook his head violently, like a man refusing reality, mouthing silent protest before his microphone finally crackled to life. "No! This is a setup, a scam, a disgrace to this nation. I am the victim here. You can't—" The gavel slammed again. "Order!" But Trump could not stop. His voice cracked into a desperate scream, each syllable raw. "They want to destroy me, to silence me. This woman, this so-called warrior, is nothing but a fraud. You'll all regret this. You'll all regret—" His words collapsed into incoherent rage, veins bulging in his neck, spit flying, his fists pounding the desk as though brute force could break the verdict itself. Cameras captured everything. The world saw not a leader, but a man unraveling, naked in his fury, stripped of the armor of power. Jasmine Crockett did not move. She stood slow and deliberate, her posture erect, her gaze unflinching. The light above caught her face, and in that stillness she became something larger than herself, an embodiment of justice that had endured insult, manipulation, deceit, and had not yielded. Her voice rose, calm yet resonant, cutting through Trump's chaos. "Mr. Chair, let the record show, no amount of shouting, no torrent of lies can bury the truth. Today, the truth has spoken." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Even Trump's tirade faltered, his breath hitching, his chest heaving as the weight of inevitability bore down on him. Around them, senators whispered, aides exchanged glances, cameras zoomed in on every flicker of expression. Outside, the reaction was instantaneous. Crowds erupted in chants that shook the streets. Some wept with joy, others screamed in fury, fists raised to the sky. In one city, fireworks burst prematurely into daylight, while in another, police struggled to hold back riots tearing through the night. The verdict had not just condemned a man, it had split a nation wide open. Trump slumped back into his chair, his body folding in on itself. For the first time, he looked small, His shoulders sagged, his hands fell limp at his sides, his mouth hung open in disbelief. His eyes darted about wildly, searching for an ally, a lifeline, a way out. But even among those who had cheered him, silence reigned. Some turned their faces away. Others scribbled notes furiously, already writing the history that would not be kind. And Jasmine remained standing, not triumphant, not gloating, but resolute, like a flame steady in the wind, refusing to die. She did not need to raise her fists. Her victory was etched into the silence, into the gavel's echo, into the millions of hearts that now saw the contrast laid bare. A man undone by his own lies, and a woman who stood unbroken. The chair's final words sealed the moment. This matter will move forward to enforcement and accountability. May history remember that in this chamber, truth prevailed. The gavel fell again. Final. Irrevocable. Trump's head dropped into his hands. A broken figure, trembling, muttering to himself, the once untouchable reduced to shadows. And Jasmine? She turned toward the gallery, her eyes scanning the faces, supporters, detractors, skeptics, believers. Her gaze seemed to reach beyond the chamber, through the cameras, into the living rooms of millions. And for those who watched, it felt personal. Because Jasmine Crockett was no longer just a congresswoman, no longer just a voice in a chamber. She was the living proof that corruption could be confronted, that power could be challenged, that even the mightiest could fall. Yet even as applause swelled outside, even as chants of justice, justice rattled the barricades, the air inside carried a lingering weight. For every cheer, there was a scream. For every candlelit vigil, there was a clenched fist pounding in rage. The war was not over. Jasmine knew it. Trump in his broken defiance knew it. The nation, split and trembling, knew it. This was a verdict, a reckoning, but not the end. The credits of history would not roll so easily. As Jasmine stepped back, her figure framed by the blaze of cameras, one could almost hear the whisper ripple through the air. The battle for America's soul has only just begun. And across the country, millions of viewers lean closer to their screens, their hearts pounding, already craving the next chapter in the war between truth and deception, light and shadow, justice and corruption. The curtain had fallen on this act, but the story was far from finished. In the end, this was never just about one man's fall or one woman's stand. It was about the fragile weight of truth and the courage it takes to protect it when the world would rather look away. We are reminded that justice is not a thunderclap, but a flame, kept alive by those who dare to believe in it, even when it flickers. And if we too choose to guard that flame, then no lie, no shadow, no corruption will ever truly prevail. If this story stirred something in you, don't scroll. Sit with it, share it, speak on it. Like, comment, and send it to someone who still believes justice must be louder than corruption. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where truth is defended and silence is never safe. Hit the bell, because the next chapter isn't calm, it's fire, and it might just change the way you see power. This story is a fictional dramatization, inspired by real injustices and real courage. Any resemblance to actual people or events is coincidental or symbolic for public reflection and critique. Thanks for watching. Justice isn't handed down, it's demanded. This is Harrison Stories.